Buying a home is about to get a lot more expensive, and not for the reasons that you think. Obviously, we have house prices that have not dropped, and as a matter of fact, continue to go up in the face of rising interest rates. And then obviously, the interest rates themselves have continued to go up. But on top of that, as a buyer of a home, it's likely you're going to have to start paying your real estate agent out of your pocket for the services that they are provided. Now, what does this all mean? Let me break it down to you in today's update. So first of all, the market itself. What's happening with interest rates? Highly, highly volatile. The Fed has said in the last couple of weeks that they're going to stay higher for longer. And now they're kind of walking that back. Now they're kind of saying, well, I mean, not that long. We're going to have to see what happens. And the Fed's really walking a very, very fine line. Why? Because in the last week, the 10-year Treasury shot way higher than what the Fed had seen and what the Fed had expected. And so the Fed's now saying, well, maybe we don't need to raise interest rates anymore because the market is doing the job for us. And that's kind of scary. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal that made a really good point that said, hey, the Federal Reserve needs to make decisions based upon what they think is right and not continue to change their mind based on the reactions of what the market is doing. Or worse yet, to say, oh, I'm going to take my hands off the wheel and let the market do my job for me. If they think higher interest rates are better, they should raise the interest rates. If they think it's not a good idea, they should lower or keep interest rates the same. But for them to say, we're going to let the market do the job for us, super scary, and it's creating a huge amount of volatility. Now, speaking of volatility, this week, the war that has broken out in Israel has created even more volatility. Now, I'm not being political. I'm not being insensitive to all of the challenges and atrocities that are happening there. I'm simply saying that, generally speaking, war drives down interest rates. In a time of war, people are fearful. There's concerns about economic issues, humanitarian issues, and it is what's called a flight to safety, not from a humanitarian perspective per se, but from a finance perspective. They move money into the bond market, which are considered safe investments. And that's what we're seeing. So we're actually seeing interest rates come down just a little bit, but remember, they shot way up in the last week and a half. So we were square into the low eights for a lot of people last week. We're pushing back into the mid to high sevens in most situations. That's good news. But where do we go from here? Who knows? There's so many pressures pushing interest rates up. There's so many pressures pushing interest rates down. I do believe the long term still holds true that we're going to see lower interest rates over time. The question is how low? Do they get back down into the fives or into the fours? Do we ever see a 3 or a 2% rate again? I don't know. But what I do know is it's a cycle, and it's really clear we're at the highest end of this cycle. And it's super clear that as interest rates come back down, house prices will keep going up. So it's going to be even more expensive going forward for you to purchase a home because you're going to have a higher priced home, more dollars required out of your pocket to pay the down payment on that higher priced home. And even with a lower interest rate, you're going to start being priced out of the market because of the competition, because of the people who are willing to pay over the asking price, people who are willing to pay over what the appraised value is, people willing to buy homes without inspections and without contingencies. All the things we saw in 2020 and 2021, when interest rates previously had been averaging between 3.5 and 4.5, and everybody went crazy when they went down to 2.5 to 3. Imagine what's going to happen when rates have now been averaging between 6 and 8. Everybody's going to go crazy when they go back down to 5. And that's going to create an environment that's going to make it more expensive for you to buy. Speaking of being more expensive for you to buy, here's information that you may or may not be aware of that's critical for you to understand how it's going to impact you. And that is how real estate agents are paid and what a current lawsuit is going to mean to what the future of how real estate agents are paid. So I'll oversimplify this and just say, for the sake of this conversation, when you sell a home, you sign a listing agreement with the seller of the seller of the home signs a listing agreement with the real estate agent representing them, and they negotiate a commission. And so they might say, hey, I'll pay X percentage. Historically, it's been around 5 or 6%, but that's negotiable. And then that agent splits that money. Now, it may not be a 50-50 split, but that agent splits that money with the agent that brings the buyer. So when you're buying a home, you're not paying out of your pocket for the commission to pay your real estate agent. Now, some realtors called that free and said, you don't pay for it, it's free. Well, it was never free because the seller built it into the sales price because they knew they had to pay X amount in percentage that covered the cost of their realtor and your realtor as the buyer. Now, this lawsuit has come along and it's been around for a few years, but basically it's a class action lawsuit that's actually going to court on Monday the 16th. Now, they're suing a whole bunch of different real estate companies, and some of the real estate companies have settled. Some of them have not, and the ones that haven't, they go to court on Monday the 16th. So it'll be really important to see what happens next week with this court case. But the ones that have settled have agreed, you know what? We're no longer going to require that the seller pay anything more than what they're paying to the agent representing them. And so now a seller can say, well, man, I'm selling a $500,000 home, and I used to have to pay $30,000 in fees to pay for my realtor and the other realtor. Now I only have to pay $15,000 in fees because I don't want to pay for the person representing the buyer. And the law now says I don't have to. Well, that may or may, there is no law yet, but that may or may not be fact. But here's the bottom line. You at least have a choice. You have a choice to say, I want to pay for the buyer's agent, or I don't want to pay for the buyer's agent. And before now, you didn't have a choice. As a matter of fact, there were rules that said that they prohibited a listing agreement from being signed without offering some compensation to the agent representing the buyer. And that's the crux of this lawsuit that says, you know what, we're getting rid of those rules. We're going to stop you from mandating that you pay for the buyer's real estate agent. But what does that mean as a buyer? What does that mean to you as you're buying a home? Because great, sellers don't have to pay for your agent. Now, they can, and I'll explain in a minute why I think in a lot of cases they should, but the fact is they don't have to. So now, are you not going to have representation? Or are you going to have to pay for them out of your pocket? That's the biggest challenge, because right now it's already a really, really hard time to buy a home. Interest rates being super high, house prices being high, consumer debt and the amount of money that people are spending right now on credit card bills and car loans, it's taken off. And so it's really hard for people to save money for a down payment, to save money for closing costs. And now you're going to have to pay for another closing cost. Now you're going to have to pay for your realtor. Now, I'm not sure that's really going to happen. I'm not sure, at least in this market cycle, that's going to happen. The reason why? Because sellers still need to give a bit of an incentive to get buyers to buy. As interest rates are staying high, there's going to be the smart sellers that are going to say, you know what? I'll pay for the buyer's agent to entice more buyers to buy my property versus not paying for the buyer's agent, because some buyers won't have the ability to pay for their own agent. So think about it this way. You're now going to likely have to start signing an agreement with your agent that you're going out and shopping for a home with that says, hey, my services are going to cost X percentage of the purchase price. Maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 3%. I don't know. But a lot of realtors already use this. It's called a buyer-broker agreement. And they say, hey, you're my buyer, I'm your broker, you agree to use me. And if you buy a home anytime in the next X period of time, maybe let's call it 6 months, then you agree that you're going to pay me a commission even if you don't use me to buy that home. You've hired me as your realtor, and we have an exclusive agreement. We have an exclusive agreement. Now, part of the reason why realtors are using this is because they spend a lot of time with you as a buyer, and they only get paid in the end when you buy a home. And so if they spend a lot of time helping you look for a home, and then you write an offer with somebody else, they donated all of that time. And that isn't really fair to them. And so also people sometimes have multiple realtors shopping for them, figuring, hey, if I'm not paying for them, so who cares? I'll have 3 people shopping. That gives me 3 times the chances of finding the right home. And whoever gets me the right home, they deserve to get paid. Nobody else deserves it. Well, the other 2 realtors just donated their time. And a lot of realtors don't believe that's a good use of their time, or that's not a good business model. So they have you sign this buyer-broker agreement. I think that's likely to become more common. So now what's going to happen is you're going to be out shopping for a home. And the realtors in some of the settlements that have come out so far, the realtors have associations, the brokerages have said, hey, we agree we're not going to let the real estate agent sort their listings by how much income they're going to get. In other words, they can't steer you to buy a home that they get paid more income on. Okay, well, that makes sense in one way. But in the other way, then how are they going to get paid? They either have to tell you, hey, you're going to pay me if the other guy doesn't. Well, doesn't that mean you're going to want to know if the other side is paying for your realtor? Are you going to want to write an offer on a home where you're going to not only have to pay your normal down payment, your normal closing costs, but then you're going to have to write a check on top of that for the services of your realtor? It's a bit of a slippery slope that we're going down. Now, again, none of these things mandate that you as the buyer have to pay for your agent's services. What they're saying is they cannot force the seller to pay for your agent's services. I'm not sure where this is going to end up. I will tell you that I think once interest rates come down and house prices start pushing up because you have even more demand on buyers, I think more demand of buyers wanting to buy fewer homes that are listed for sale. Now the sellers are really going to say, I don't need to pay for your realtor, which means that it's more likely down the road when it becomes even more competitive of a market and interest rates come down that you're going to have to write a check to pay for your realtor's commission. And I can't finance it. I'm not allowed to finance that. And I'm not allowed to finance any closing costs into the loan. So now you either have to offer the seller more on the home in order to offset the money. So you say, hey, seller, on this $500,000 home, I know you're not paying the 15 grand for my realtor, but how about if I buy the home from you for $515,000, then you pay for my realtor? That is perfectly legitimate, perfectly fine. The seller still gets all of their money. You don't have to write a check to pay for your realtor. Problem is, if there's 20 or 30 other people writing offers on those homes, just like what we saw in 2020 and 2021, why is the seller going to agree to that? The seller says, no, I'll take the $515,000, please, and you continue to pay for your realtor because I have somebody else willing to pay $515,000 and I don't have to pay for their realtor. So this is my worry. My worry continues to be the same as what it's been, which is if you are looking to buy a home and you do not have a lot of money for down payment and closing costs, and you can afford the monthly payment that today's interest rates are calculating out to, you have to buy sooner versus later because it's not going to get easier to buy a home down the road. Now, down the road, ultimately, inventory is going to go up. There'll be enough homes listed for sale that it'll get back to equilibrium like we had before the crash in 2008. But that's going to take a long time to get there. How long? I don't know. It's definitely not happening in the next 2 or 3 years. So you have to decide, can I make this work now? Do I need to move in and pool my money with family so that we can all afford to buy a home now and get on the train of home ownership? Because here's the challenge. You're not going to find a lot of small homes listed for sale right now, inexpensive homes, starter homes listed for sale right now, because the people who bought those starter homes in the last 5 and 7 years that would normally be selling them now, they're stuck. They don't want to sell because they've got a super low interest rate. They're in a position right now where if they sell, they're going to buy a more expensive home and their payment's going to go way up because the interest rates are a lot higher right now. And so it's a challenge that we're dealing with that it's going to take a while to sort through. But I do firmly believe that homeownership is the best tool to long-term wealth as long as you can afford the monthly payments. So if you wonder, am I in that position? Can I make this work? Maybe it's about pooling your money with a family member so that you can afford it. You guys split the house in half. Do like they did on the Brady Bunch. I know I'm showing my age, but put tape down the middle of the room and say, this is your half and this is my half, and you're not allowed to step on my half of the house. Kind of kidding there. But find a way to make it happen. Think creatively. If you want creative ideas, give me a call. I'd love to guide you. Thanks so much for listening this week, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.